Sure.
I'm Tony Cullen and I'm the Membership Secretary. Nice to meet you.
Dennis O'Shea, HAGAS.
I'm Martin Weston, I'm Vice Chairman.
Kevin Noble, Programme Secretary.
I'm Roger Groombridge, I've just joined.
Hello.
I'm Steve Waters, normal member.
Logan Lachinsky, same.
Richard Williams, same.
Stephen Halleckser.
So, good evening, everyone. I'm Kevin Noble, and this evening we're privileged to have Hannah Rochford join us via Zoom to talk about her journey in astrophotography. I was fortunate enough to receive a Father's Day gift of tickets to the Greenwich Astronomy Photographer of the Year 2022, and the standard is incredibly high and a bit daunting if you aspire to reach such a level in astrophotography. I remember seeing Hannah's image there, and it was displayed in the Best Newcomer category, and really inspired and somewhat jealous of the standard of her image in the first year of astrophotography. And so, welcome, Hannah, and over to you to invoke some inspiration in us and follow your footsteps.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so I've done a little presentation for you all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and then I'll talk through the slides, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end, because I hope I've got some good questions. I love questions, so just ask anything you want, because there we go, I think. Right, can everybody see this? My screen.
Yes. Can you maximize it for us?
Yeah, is that okay?
That's it, excellent.
Oh, sorry. There you go. Okay, so I'm Hannah Rochford. Hi, nice to meet everybody. And I'm just going to talk to you about my journey so far in astrophotography. So you can see that top image on the right, that was my very first kind of deep space image that I took in April 2021. And the one below is a portion of the whole of the Vale complex. It's Pickering's Triangle, and it's a close crop of my last project, which was 60 hours long. So I'll show you a bit more about that image, which took me 3 months and a very long time, very long time, lots of patience. It was my first kind of mosaic. So where did it all start? So a lot of people ask me this question. I think I've just always been very, very attracted to lightness and dark. So this, for example, this is one of my final pieces for university. I was looking at beauty and the banal and life and death. And I just wanted this really dark background with these vibrant kind of colors popping out. And this kind of reminds me a bit of astro in a way, because it's light coming out of darkness. So I studied art and photography to A level. Well, I studied art A level, but I kind of did photography within that. And then I got a degree in photography at Falmouth University. And I used to teach photography to A-level students and art to Key Stage 3. So that's given me kind of a help in the processing aspect of things. But at the same time, processing astrophotography is completely different to anything I've ever done before. It's its own kind of sector. It's really quite kind of different. So the thing that really got me started specifically in deep space and astro is I was looking on Instagram, and my friend Mark had taken these amazing pictures of the moon, and he had just used I think it was a 400mm lens, and I was just like blown away because I just hadn't seen it before, and I just thought I really want to take pictures of the moon. So I went and got like I think it's a Sigma 150 to 600mm lens, which for the money is very good value, and you can, 600mm is quite a long focal length, and you can really get into some details on the moon just with a single shot. So that's an example of one of my first sort of images. And then it just kind of kept taking pictures of the moon, and then I started taking photos of the moon behind things to make the moon appear bigger. Sorry, some water. And yeah, I just became more and more sort of more in love with the night sky and stars and constellations and seeing everything like that. And this was my first image in the BBC Sky at Night magazine. So I went to the Gower camping in the summer of 2021, and it was quite late at night, sort of 11:30 at night, and I could see these amazing clouds, and they were sort of dancing. And I said to my boyfriend at the time, I was like, wow, what's that? That is amazing. So I got my camera out and took a few different exposures, 5, 10, 15 seconds. And I came out like this, and it was really, really special. I didn't really know much about them, but I thought, well, they look like noctilucent clouds. And I showed my boss, who's really into astronomy. He was like, yeah, that's that. And yeah, I was really, really proud of that. And that kind of threw me into the world of astro even more, because I had my first photo published in this magazine that was, I never thought would happen. You know, it was very surreal. And then I went back to, I just kept taking photos of the moon. And this, I live quite close to Glastonbury in Somerset. So Glastonbury Tor is a feature of many of my moon rises, just because it's on top of a really big hill and it's surrounded by loads of flat land. So you can always get, nearly every month of the year, you can always get the moon rising behind it, and it kind of gives it that big appearance. I use an app called Photo Pills, which I'll go a bit more into later. It's got lots of really great features for Milky Way and moon and everything like that. And this was an image that I took September 2021, so the harvest moon. It was highly commended in the People in Space category in the Royal Greenwich Museum Astronomy Photographer of the Year competition, in the same year that I won Best Newcomer for my deep sky image of Milot 15. So I think one of these photos was in the press release on the Daily Mail, and it was quite funny seeing the comments, because there were a lot of people thinking that it's not real, it's fake, but you know, it's quite simple. The actual science behind it is, if I'm stood in front of somebody and I move a mile away, they're going to look really small, that I can't see them anymore. Whereas if I'm stood in front of the moon and I move a mile away, the moon will appear the same size. If you put that behind a person that you're stood a mile away from, the moon's going to look massive. So it's a really nice kind of illusion, and using a 600mm length lens just compresses it all together in a single plane, and it looks like those people are watching the moon at that size. And I'll always go in 10 minutes we've got. I'll always go and kind of chase the moonrise, because I just am obsessed. So I'm really proud of that photo. And this is when I started imaging deep space. So this was in April, like I said. This, believe it or not, is the Orion Nebula. Well, it's a bit of a wide field, really. I can't remember what focal length that is, but I think it's like 70mm or something like that. I was really proud of this, even though it took me about 20 hours to stack it, because I was using a really old PC. It crashed and I had to do it again, and it was a nightmare, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I could see something more than just stars, and that's when I became really kind of hooked on it. And this is the equipment that I use. So I didn't use any tracking or anything like that. I literally just took, I think it was 1,000 1.2 second exposures, because I couldn't use a longer exposure because I'll get too many star trails, because I wasn't tracking. My old 5D Mark II with the lens and an intervalometer. So they're really good if you're just doing kind of time lapses, or if you're doing DSLR astro and you can set the number of frames you want to take, any like length of the frames, that kind of thing. So I managed to kind of process it again, and I came out with a bit more color in the right hand image there. So I was quite kind of happy. And then my boss, who I've mentioned, he's really into astronomy. He said, you've got to get a Star Adventurer or something like that. You need to start tracking to really get some good results. So he bought me one, which is really kind of him. And I got carried away with that, and it just completely opened up everything. So I was able to take longer exposures. I was able to take 2-minute subs, and then I'll take 2 or 3 hours of 2-minute exposures, stack them together, and deep sky stacker. And the results I was getting, I mean, for the I was only doing it for a few months, and I was quite happy with that because I was getting more than what I could see with my eyes. And it just, I still wanted more. I still wanted more. This is an example of M42. On the left is untracked in April, and on the right shows the difference just in when you start taking those longer exposures, you can reveal so much more detail. And it's crazy. I took 3 images with that Star Adventure, and then I bought a mono camera and it's a bit crazy. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just got a bit obsessed with narrowband, and I really wanted to shoot narrowband. I wanted a mono camera. I wanted a good kind of tracking mount and everything. So did some research, got a loan, and invested in quite a lot of equipment. So yeah, it requires so much patience. Like my images now are never less than 30 hours of integration time. And in this country, it can be very, very difficult. So yeah, it's mad. This is the kind of setup I have at the moment. So it's a lot different from the Star Adventure. You've got a lot more to think about. So I've got the dedicated astronomy camera, and because it's mono, I have to have LRGB, so luminance, red, green, and blue, and then the SHO, which are narrowband. I have to have those filters as well, which are installed into an electronic filter wheel. So it all connects to, I use the ASIR, so it connects to my iPad, and I can choose which filter I want to use. It's all kind of electronic. It's very clever. I use a refractor instead of a lens, and I've introduced guiding as well, which means I can, it's another telescope, a little one in a camera, and it kind of tracks the stars, and it will send little signals back to the mount to correct if it's kind of over or under guiding kind of thing. And dew heaters, which are very, very important. So that's an example of that's my biggest refractor. That's the Explore Scientific 127, so 127mm refractor, a focal length of 952. So that's really good. That's good for things like planetary nebulae, galaxies, because they're obviously often quite small, or really close-up work of nebulae. I don't know if anybody uses ASIR, but this is what I use. I've never used anything else. I'm really happy with this. You don't get the whole functionality that you would maybe with another platform. And with ASIR, you are locked in to using the same brand cameras, but I love their cameras, so I have no issue with that at all. It's a very just plug and play kind of thing. I feel like it's just so easy, and it's wireless, so you can just sit inside in the warm if you want, even though I don't, because I'm just a sucker. The guiding, so this is what I was talking about with the guide camera and the guide scope. This is kind of showing it's got multi-star guiding, so it will hook up to 7 to 9 stars, and it will just keep an eye on them, and it will, the lower the number the better basically. And this is another feature of the ASIR, is the Sky Atlas. It's got built-in Sky Atlas. You can kind of go around the constellations, see where they are in relation to your location. You can see tonight's best, so you can see what time they set, what time they're highest, their kind of altitude, and things like that. It's really, really useful. It's nice because you can rotate it as well, and you can kind of frame your targets and do what you kind of want with that. We have an example of narrowband imaging. So this is, instead of the camera taking loads of the same image, we're now taking 3 different sets. We're taking sets of sulfur, oxygen, and hydrogen. And we're doing that by putting those filters in front of the camera, in between the camera and the telescope. So in between that, we've got 3 hours of sulfur, 3 hours of oxygen, and 3 hours of hydrogen. This was my first narrowband project, so I only took 9 hours on it. But it still came out really nicely. And this is the Rosette Nebula. It's in quite a good position at the moment, I think. And it's a really nice target. It's got a lot of depth to it, lots of dusty details. The hydrogen alpha is just gorgeous on this target. But I stick those into PixInsight, or you can do it in Photoshop as well, and you assign red to sulfur, sulfur to red, sorry, oxygen to blue, and hydrogen to green. So you have your RGB image as sulfur, oxygen, hydrogen. And that's the same way that the Hubble telescope, that's how they show their images, those kind of gorgeous goldeny kind of hues and the blues and greens. And that's the final image there. So it's that was one of my later reworks. It wasn't my first edit by any stretch of the imagination. It's still a bit noisy actually looking at it now, and that's probably because I haven't spent a lot of time on it. But it's got a lot of depth to it, and it's kind of because of the target, there's just so much in there. And this is why I wanted to do narrowband imaging, because I just saw other people's photos on Instagram, because I was just being linked up to the algorithm when I was posting photos of the moon. And that's what made me want to do narrowband, was these kind of images. It's those peaches kind of hues and the blues and everything like that. I just really, really like it. My first proper edit that I showed anybody is on the left here, and that actually got into the BBC Sky at Night magazine. So that was my first narrowband image, and I could say my first kind of proper, like, serious image, because I was really using a telescope and I was taking it a bit more seriously, spending a bit more time on it. But I do prefer now to just have a much paler palette in my images. I just think it shows a bit more detail, and I used to go quite dark with the background, but I don't anymore, because space is full of hydrogen alpha, it's not black. So it's sometimes good to remember that, and you can actually pick up quite a lot of dust from the background. This picture here was the picture that Kevin was talking about. It's the Melot 15, so it's a center crop of the image on the left here. And this is my third image. This was about 30 hours of data, and I did it in winter, so it only took 5 nights, which I still can't believe. But again, I've assigned it to that Hubble palette, and it's got those kind of, those very pleasing to me hues of peaches and dark, and you know, it's in the behind the kind of star forming thing in the middle, you've got like gas going in all sorts of directions, and I just think there's so much going on in this nebula, and this is always in quite a good position for us because it's really, really northern, really high, so it's always quite kind of good. I was just going to go through the most important things to consider when doing astro, like from what I've learned in the last couple of years. So it's when you are setting your telescope up and everything, you've got to make sure that it's balanced. And what I mean by that is, you can see this picture down here. This is polar alignment in the ASI user interface. But you basically got to make sure that your telescope is pointing to Polaris, the northern star. That just means that your tracking is going to be a lot better. And I mean, if you look on the left here, this is an example of badly tracked images or bad guiding. It could be down to a number of things, but it's a kind of an example of, that's the difference between a badly aligned scope and a well aligned scope. And I know from when I was doing lots of stuff with the Star Adventurer how important that polar alignment is, and it's much easier with ASI Air because you kind of have this here and it tells you how far to go up and down rather than just looking through at a weird angle with your neck. If you haven't got a telescope and you're looking to get one, it's a good idea to have a look at this. This is a website that is made by First Light Optics, astronomy.tools. It's got loads of calculators in it. It's got loads of really, really handy tools, and so I would definitely recommend looking at that. This is an example of my camera, and on the left with my 18mm Skywatcher Evo Star, it's in the green. It's quite, it's good, you know, it's got it's a good ratio. It works well with my camera, whereas my 60mm telescope is a bit undersampled. So what that means is that my stars, when I take an image through this scope, my stars look quite square. They're not perfectly round. So you have to do things in post that take a lot of time and a lot of memory on your computer to kind of fix them. This is kind of what I was talking about. So be patient and take time with processing. So this is what I was talking about before about clipping the blacks. So maybe, you know, 2 years ago, if I had taken this image, I would have processed it differently. I probably would have done. On the left, you can see in the levels kind of screenshot there that I've completely cut off a huge chunk of the dark area. And I've also, yeah, it's just like, and what that's done is that's made the background completely black, and it's taken away so much detail of the arms of this galaxy. This is M101 when the supernova kind of happened. And in the right, you can see we've got a nice level. That left slider on the screenshot is really far left, and you've still got all of that information nicely kind of spread out. It's obviously going to be a bit darker because you're taking photos of space and it's quite dark, but you're capturing everything, and you can see a lot more details. You can see kind of little galaxies in the one in the right in the background that you just can't see on the left. So it doesn't happen overnight. You've got to practice. It really is one of those things that does take a few times. Like I definitely didn't get it, and I still have so much to learn. I've probably cracked about 1% of PixInsight, but it's fun, and there's no pressure to, you know, it's just fun. And yeah, this is a really big one for me. And like I said, I don't take less than 30 hours on my images now, and partly because I've got a mono camera. If you've got a mono camera, your images will really benefit from this. If I had an OSC, so a color camera, I may take 20 hours and be happy with it, but the more time you spend, the more signal that you get, so the more kind of detail you get. It also makes the image a lot less noisier as well. So this here is 30 minutes of oxygen on a supernova remnant called Abell 85. This is a project I spent 70 hours on last winter. So I did 45 hours of oxygen on this and 25 hydrogen alpha. I couldn't see a single thing in a single 10-minute exposure on oxygen, and I was worried because I didn't have a computer at the time, so I had to go into work and edit everything, and I just didn't check. So I just blindly went on and did 45 hours, and luckily I did get some oxygen. But this is 30 minutes, and then that's 10 hours, and that's 40 hours. So you can kind of see the difference there. And yes, the stars you get more stars, but you remove them in post-processing and process them separately anyway. But you can see the difference in the detail we're getting. And this is, like I said, just the oxygen, and yeah, it's very weak. But that was part of that image there. So this is Abell 85 or CTB1. It's in Cassiopeia. This was one of my favorite projects because it was just so kind of unknown, and I didn't know what I was going to get. There's that tiny slither of oxygen in there, which is 45 hours worth, which is crazy. But if you look to the outside, you can see almost like a shell of that central gas explosion, and it's almost as if those are the shells of when the star went supernova 10,000 years ago. And I mean, just look at the hydrogen alpha in the background. It's just represented by red. There's just so much. And yeah, this was my favorite, one of my favorite images. And I think that was my first post of last year, actually. I processed it on New Year's Eve and published it on New Year's Day. So that was quite fun. I will just quickly touch on processing, but I'm not going to go too in depth with it. So just the programs that I've tried and used, some of them I haven't tried. So I started with Deep Sky Stacker. It's only for PC. That's the limitation of it. It is free, and it's a very good program just for quick stacking. It will automatically reject bad ones. You can tell it to reject X amount of bad ones if you only want 50%, you know, and you can do that. GIMP I have not really tried, but it is free. Astro Pixel Processor, I tried that, but I could not get on with it at all. I didn't understand it. It just wasn't working for me. Photoshop, that's kind of universal on all platforms, so that's really good. Plus it's very powerful. The camera raw filter is very, very powerful, and that's why I do use that, but I will always use PixInsight first. It's a bit tricky to get your head around. There's, like I said earlier, there's so much I don't know, but that's what I love about Astro, is I'm always learning and I'm always pushing myself to do more things and trying new things. And yeah, it's a good investment, I would say. So it's 220, and I've gone up now, actually. I think they've had a price rise, but it's a life license, so you don't have to pay again. And the R&D team are very good. They're always kind of updating it and sending out updates. A very rough guide to my workflow. So I do everything before I even get an image in PixInsight. I pre-process it, so I calibrate my light frames. So the frames I've taken, if you see down in these 4 corners here, the bottom right, so that's a single image. That's an image of, I think that's a wide field of M45, I'm not sure, but sorry if you heard, that's the dogs. So yeah, you calibrate the light frame with your flats and dark flats or bias. So your flats are taking an image here. You can see kind of the vignetting and the dust spots. So that's just, you're going to take 40 or so of those and stack them together. And then you subtract that from your light frames. So you're subtracting any vignetting or dust spots. And then there are much easier explained things online, by the way. And then you use cosmetic correction. So what that's doing is that taking out any hot pixels, you set parameters for it, it'll remove any hot pixels or other things like that. Debayer, that's only if you're using OSC, so I'm not really very familiar with that. But then subframe selector is where you set parameters for your images based on FWHM. It could be eccentricity of the stars. It could be that there's a number of things it can be, and you set limits to that, and then it will measure your measure your frames and tell you which ones are okay and which ones are bad. So that's actually very useful. And then star align. So that's just where you choose a frame and then you align everything else to that, so that when you stack them together, they're all nice and not kind of different. Because the scope will move slightly through the night. It's not going to stay in exactly the same position. And then image integration, so you're just stacking everything together. I then take it into the image solver, so it can read the coordinates of the image and it knows what it's looking at, and then it will do spectrophotometric color calibration. There's some really weird names in PixInsight. And that just, yes, it's color calibrates the image and it kind of does a background neutralization. And then I'll do like any sharpening and noise reduction. And I do these on the separate frames. So actually the noise reduction should be above the SPCC, but then I'll combine the channels, remove the stars. I do the initial stretches, so I stretch them slightly. I'll always stretch the stars separately from the main image because they just do not need the same amount, and I like to have minimal stars in my images. And then just finish off with some curves adjustments, but there's a lot more I do than that, but that's a kind of basic workflow. So some of the AI tools that I use by Russell Croneman. So this is an example of Blur Exterminator. He has just released a new version 4, which is crazy. I had some very bad kind of egg-shaped stars in one of my subs, and I tested it the other day and I was blown away. It made them round. It's a very, very powerful piece of kit. I don't know if you can see the difference there, but it's just made the stars are tighter. It's made the detail more detailed. It's really, really, really wonderful. Noise exterminator, again, I'm not sure if you can see that very well, but it just gets rid of noise, and you can, it's all kind of adjustable. You can kind of see, you can tell it how much you want to do it or how little you want to do it. And star exterminator, so just literally removing the stars. It's very good. And like I say, I mean, I like to work on the nebulae differently, like separately, sorry, from the stars, because you also want to keep the star color. I mean, it's quite hard in narrowband to have a nice star color, but they just don't need stretching as much as the background there. Some apps and websites that I use. So like I said, astronomy tools, and it has got this kind of little field of view kind of thing in where you can put in different combinations of scopes and cameras and your target. Telescopius is the same sort of thing. I prefer Telescopius just because it's a bit prettier, like the imagery is very, very kind of visually pleasing, and you can save all of your telescopes and cameras in there as well, so you can just click on them and see how it lines up and adjust the angle. It's very, very useful if you're planning. Photo pills, so again, this is what I was talking about earlier, so you can work out where the moon's going to rise, how big it's going to be, and you can kind of see it on this screenshot of the app here. You can see how big that moon's going to be. That was a shot that I had planned for October, but the weather was bad down in Cornwall, behind St Michael's Mount, and I never got down there, unfortunately, but this is how I do all of my moon rises, and it's very accurate, and yeah, I love that app. And on the bottom there, it has a night AR as well, so in the summer you can see where the Milky Way is going to be, the positions and everything. Sky Guide is a really good app. There is a paid version and there's a free version, but it has a very useful calendar in there with everything that's happening, you know, and you can zoom into stars and nebulae and get more information on them. It's a very pretty interface of the constellations, very nice visually, and it has like a compass, so it's like all augmented reality. You can see where everything is in relation to yourself, so that's really cool. Aurora Watch, this app is, I mean, that was actually that was on 5th of November, and I got the picture of the Northern Lights from Somerset, and I have never seen it that high before. That was absolutely crazy. I've only ever seen it go up to 400 before, because of the sun's maximum is going to be next year. I think we're going to see more and more solar flares and storms, and that will result in more aurora, which is really exciting. And this one got on my local news, which was quite nice, on BBC, so that was quite nice. I'll just show you some of, so I was talking earlier about processing progress and how I've revisited a lot of my initial targets, and I've processed them again, and I'm very happy with how much I've learned. I can still learn a lot more, but this is an example of the Leo triplet, and this, yeah, because I was adding, this is an LRGB, so it's got luminance data, red, green and blue data using those filters, and the detail I've pulled out in the second process is so much more than the first time I did it, and my workflow is very different now, but yeah, I was really, really pleased with that one. IC1396, the Elephant Trunk Nebula, so yeah, I think you can see the stars, and this was when in the summer year before last, and my focuser was slipping very badly, and I've got a lot of dodgy photos from then because all of the stars are a little bit, they're not perfect, but got the new blur exterminator, put it through that, and the stars are okay in this one. And you can kind of see I've gone a bit, not really paler, but it's just I've kept a lot more detail in this, even though I've zoomed right back out, and I'm quite proud of this one. This is different setup, so it's not really a fair comparison, but this is the Pleiades, and you can see, you can even see on the DSLR on the left, to the left, just above the middle, I don't know, can you see my arrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a little galaxy called UNC 2838 or something like that. You can see it clearer here. That's 300 million light years away, and you just think the time that light has taken to get to us is from before dinosaurs walked the earth. And it's crazy, I could pick it up on a DSLR, like a 10-year-old old DSLR with a substandard lens, you know. It's amazing what we can see just with the most amateur equipment. It's really fascinating. You've seen this one, but this was my first edit of the rosette. This is exactly the same data, 9 hours. That was on the left, the first one that I tried in Photoshop. And I didn't show that to anybody because I was so frustrated after seeing the stack of hydrogen alpha looking so beautiful and then putting them together and getting that. I was so disappointed. But I just kept practicing and eventually got around to doing it in PixInsight on the right. And you can see it's evident there's a lot more detail there because it's purely because of the way I've processed it. It's not down to the data capture. I find that quite interesting. Thor's helmet. So this was the first light with my 127 refractor. Now this only gets, for me, I think it's about 30 degrees altitude. I think it's not very high. It was annoying capturing this. I think I took about 30 hours and I ended up with 8 and I was gutted, but because of the atmospheric turbulence and because it was just so close to the horizon, I had to bin a lot of data and it was very annoying. But this second edit here got me an APOD, so that was just over a year ago now, and I still can't really, I don't really know why. But really proud of myself for that. And I think partly because it's such a difficult target from my latitude, and it was the first light with one of my telescopes, and I just had so much trouble processing this, you wouldn't believe. I spent hours and hours and hours to get to a point where I was actually happy. And then my first submission to them being like chosen as an APOD was crazy, and I'm still very thankful for that. Just going through some of my images now, just a few. So here's the tadpoles in Eureka, IC410, and I love this area of the sky because there's just so much depth to it, and these little structures. So they're roughly 7 light years in diameter, and when you think about like our solar system being 0.00127 light years in diameter, it just blows your mind a bit, but it makes you understand how we can look at this for months and years and it doesn't move. Well, it is moving very quickly, of course, but because we're so far away, it's so big, I can't imagine the scale of it. It's crazy. M16, I have done a better edit of this somewhere, but I can't find it, so it's my old edit of that. But that was a really exciting one. Again, that's very low on the horizon, and I think about 90% of these images were taken during astronomical twilight because it gets to its highest, most suitable point for me in the summer. So I was setting up my scope at 11 o'clock at night and packing it away at 1 o'clock. It was really frustrating because we don't really get any darkness at all for 2 months of the year. So, but it shows that narrowband you can image in. It doesn't have to be completely dark. It can be kind of twilight, and it still kind of works to a point. The Wizard Nebula. So I took this data at the same time as I took the elephant trunk data. So the stars were a bit like not very good, so I fixed them. I really like this one, and it really does look like a little wizard in there. That's about 30 hours of narrowband data, 10 hours on each filter. This was just a secondary target that I wasn't really that invested in. So I was imaging something else, and when my main target kind of disappeared, but it got too low, I just switched to this one. This is about 15 hours of narrowband data. I need to add to it because I think there is a lot more to be seen there. And there's the comet that went by. I captured this, in February. So this was really tough because when it got to a good position for me, it was kind of 3 or 4, maybe 5 in the morning. And I remember having to go to work the next day, and I was just like having to wait for this to rise up behind a tree. I've got this really big tree by my house. And with these kind of things, this is probably about an hour of data, because you don't, it's moving so much, you kind of don't want to take too much with comets. And this is all sort of 10-20 second exposures of just RGB and luminance. So it's, yeah, it was nice capturing my first sort of comet. It was very exciting. There's Able 85 again, just in a different orientation, a bit more contrasty. There's a wider view of M45 with all the kind of dust. But you can see from, if you remember my first image of this, the background is very black, but you can see here that it's not. There's so much dust everywhere. And just kind of bringing that out in a nice way so that it's not kind of overpowering, but it's just goes in nicely and it's not overpowering. Yeah, M101, the pinwheel galaxy. So I have a love-hate relationship with LRGB. I love narrowband. I don't like broadband. This is LRGB and hydrogen alpha. So you can see the pockets of red. That's represented by the hydrogen alpha, because like our galaxy, there's a lot of hydrogen alpha in there. It was a pain to process this. I know I could probably do a better job. I just much prefer narrowband, but I am starting to like LRGB a bit more. There's a recent re-edit of the Heart Nebula. Just trying to get a little bit more detail out of there and less stars. And to the left here, you can see that's a little planetary nebula there. So that was a little surprise when I processed it. That was really exciting. This was my last completed project. So this is the Veil Nebula. So this is the reason I bought a small 60mm telescope, because I didn't want to do a 4-panel. I wanted to get the whole Veil Nebula, the whole Veil complex, but I didn't want to do, it would have taken me, you know, like 120 hours to do 4 panels, and I just couldn't do that in this country. So I did it with my 60mm scope in 2 panels for each hydrogen alpha and oxygen. There is sulfur in the Veil complex, but I prefer this in just map to HOO, so HOO, so hydrogen to red and oxygen to green and blue. It just gives a nice blue and red kind of image. So you can see here you've got the hydrogen and the oxygen, and you have to, so much work, it's just ridiculous. You have to stack everything and star align everything and then merge them together. But if you ever do a mosaic, one thing I would suggest is this top tip here. Spend 30 minutes to an hour on each panel, then move to the other panel. That makes it so much easier. The sky changes, it's not always the same. You don't want to be spending 20 hours on the top panel and then go to the bottom panel, because it will be harder to blend those together. So that's how I did this. I did half an hour. So this was 10-minute exposures. Yeah, 10 minutes, I think. So, you know, 3 exposures top, 3 exposures bottom. I keep going like that because I knew that it would be a lot easier to make it seamless. And yeah, I mean, if you have like a go-to mount with plate solving to previous exposures, that makes it a lot easier as well, because you're going to have less cropping to do and the scope will move a lot less. There are some amazing tutorials on YouTube that I found when I was processing my first mosaic. But that there is the total 60 hours, 30 hours hydrogen, 30 hours oxygen of the Cygnus loop. And this is such a detailed image. I'm so proud of this. It took me such a long time. And this on Astrobin, you can see it in full detail and you can zoom in quite a lot, and it's quite, I'm just so kind of happy with what my camera's picked up, and all these kind of little kind of areas here and this kind of shell of hydrogen alpha going around. And yeah, it took me a long time, and I still would have loved to get more this way, but I just couldn't. I committed myself to this, and there's just some kind of details of it. There's the witch's broom and Pickering's triangle. And again, I've tried to keep the background quite kind of neutral. If you clip the blacks too much and you make the background too dark, you'll lose so much of this hydrogen alpha, like these faint areas where there's lots of really delicate gas. You'll just lose all of that and it will look a bit too contrasty. And the Bat Nebula, so you can see that kind of cape of hydrogen alpha there. And this is moving incredibly fast. It's moving, I can't remember the figures now, but it's more, it's something like 200 miles a second or something. And it's just so quick. I did see an animation that someone had taken a picture of the Veil Nebula every year for 10 years and then played it, and you could see the slightest movement. And it was really exciting because we obviously don't see that. But yeah, Pickering's Triangle again. So I think that's quite nice. I've just been asked by a Swedish band to have that as their next album cover, actually, which is quite funny, which is quite cool. But yeah, lots of just random gases everywhere, and yeah, loads and loads of hydrogen alpha. I did do a video. It's not the best. It's just an animation that I did. You should have music with it, but it's not working. And yeah, we're just kind of zooming into some areas that we've just seen. Again, this is hydrogen to red and oxygen to green and blue. So you get that kind of pale blue. I say the blue is representing oxygen in this image, and the red hydrogen. And I loved doing this project. It was so exciting, my first mosaic, and just seeing all the details come to life, and like all of this that you don't see in a single frame, you know. It's like this loop here, you only see that when you stack 30 hours together of hydrogen, and it's a really great feeling when you get it all finished.
Great detail, isn't it?
I think it's quite kind of eerie because if you think about it, it is kind of the remnants of a dying star, and it is kind of quite spooky and eerie. It's a bit like, it reminds me of like a graveyard. I don't know. And that's it. This is the project I'm working on. I've got all the data for it, but I do not. It's LRGB and H8, and I don't like it. So it's taking me a long time. The Ghost of Cassiopeia IC63. But yes, that is it from me.
That's very good.
Thank you.
Questions, anyone? I'll start off, shall I?
Yeah.
I wrote some questions down, but you covered two of them anyway in the presentation. But one thing that springs to mind, being a photographer first, how does this influence your approach to deciding on a target and how you build up to that? Is there like a process you use to do that? You know, I must admit sometimes you think, quick, clear night, and you just look on Stellarium, that would do, and you start shooting it, and you know, you're stuck with that for maybe 5 or as many nights as you want to until it probably moves out of view. I don't know, but do you put more planning into it?
I think I do. I mean, I did make a little Excel spreadsheet of things I want to target, which things I want to photograph, sorry, which constellation they're in, what months are they good to photograph, which telescope would I need. I'm a bit kind of anal about it, but at the same time, I spend so long on each target that I've already got my next target planned in my head for like 4 months' time. So I'm doing one at the moment, which I'm keeping secret until I post it. I sometimes do that with my target, I don't know. It's in Cassiopeia though, and it's setting fast, so I need to finish it soon. But I know, I think coming from a photography background as well, I think composition comes a lot easier to me. I'm quite fussy about the way things are composed. and the orientation. And if I've got quite a close kind of crop, I need to be very certain about that, because I can't really rotate it or, you know, crop it very much if it's quite a tight crop to my scope.
So I know, I mean, so on that note of framing, I know sometimes I decide to frame in stellarium and you start shooting it, and then when it finally comes, think, oh, no, it's not quite right. You know, you need to shift it a bit. Obviously, it's used, you know, it's centered on the center of the target itself. And you might want to shift. How long sort of you spend trying to reframe it to get it just right?
Oh, probably like 15 minutes on the night that I start. Yeah, because I already have like a rough idea. And I mean, I generally don't pick targets that are big for my scope. I like to have room to crop and rotate. Like, I just have that in mind. And also because I dither and stuff like that, I need it to have room to crop. So yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
Oh yeah, I've got something. Hi. I've got a Skywatcher Evo Star actually, and I'm amazed that which of the particular images were done with the Evo Star 80 then that you've shown us.
So the Wizard Nebula, Abel 85, Malot 15, Elephant Trunk Nebula.
Yeah.
Well,
what was it? That's amazing. I mean, what I was going to say is it's by no means a top-end telescope, is it? It just
no,
shows,
it's not.
It shows you, you know, what you can do with any effort you learn into improving your processing is by far the most valuable way you can spend your time in astrophotography, really, isn't
I
it?
agree 100%. You know, I've seen people spend thousands on a setup and they don't put the effort in, and they don't want to practice, and they don't want to learn. And that's the most detrimental thing, because, well, I think you can see from some of my processing progress, that's from me learning and wanting to do better with the same data set. The Rosette was Evo Star as well. That scope though, I think that cost me about £420.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's just worth its weight in gold. Well,
Yeah.
not
I mean,
but you know,
the problem I had was that the focuser would slip. So at the moment, I'm thinking of buying a new focuser for it. Yeah,
that's exactly what I did. So that was when I was saying about the elephant trunk and the wizard. So those images were taken in the summer, and the focuser was slipping because I've got a big heavy camera and filter wheel. It lasted about a year, but then it started slipping. I've upgraded it to the Barda still track, and I mean it's quite a lot of money, but it is amazing. It's so nice, smooth, buttery, and it's strong. It's well worth the investment. The Barda still track.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
That's okay.
And I think another thing is you must go for those individual points of setting it up.
Yeah.
You know, like balance and so on, and polar alignment.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that to your best ability, it's going to show up when you're taking images. They'll be soft and, you know, bad stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is very important.
That was fantastic, Hannah. Really,
Yes, it's very
really interesting and inspiring.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I don't think I get a bit nervous, and I get a bit kind of, I say a lot. So I'm sorry about that.
Doesn't show at all.
No, it was a great presentation and nice information in there. And yeah, really enjoyed it, and well done. Well done.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you.